Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first 2023 Budget Committee meeting. We do have our CAO Gibbons attending virtually tonight, just so everyone's aware. And at this point in time, I'd like to call on nominations of a chair for the 2023 Budget Advisory Committee. Jeremy?
I'll nominate Councillor Smith.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Amanda?
I was going to second it.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wants to nominate anyone else for chair? No? Okay, so I've moved by Jeremy and seconded by Amanda that the Township of Perth East Budget Advisory Committee appoint Jerry Smith as chair for 2023. And all in favor? Okay. Councillor Smith, just ask you to move over.
Great, thank you, Ashley. This time on the agenda, we'd like to have a moment of reflection. Please bow your heads. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda, item 4. A mover, please. Jeremy, seconded by Bob. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Do so now or if it arises. We have 6 items on the consent agenda. Are any of those items need pulled or more information on? Seeing none, need a mover for the consent items, please. Moved by Amanda, seconded by Hugh. Any comments, questions? All in favor? That one's carried. We have no delegations this evening. We have some reports we're going to get through. And the first one I see is 8.1, budget methodology and highlights, and Paula's report. Paula, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Smith. So I'm just going to review with the Budget Advisory Committee the highlights of my report before you tonight, and I'll try and be as quick as I can and try not to talk too quickly, so just stop me if I'm going too fast. So I'll just remind the committee that all department managers have entered the operating budgets within the budgeting software, and those items have been reviewed line by line as we start with the CPI increase on all line items, and then they're adjusted down if not required or adjusted up if so needed, because for instance the liability insurance has increased 10.05%, as well as fuel has increased greater than the CPI. So another item to note is amortization expense is not budgeted within the operations budget. That is a non-cash transaction that happens at year end, and it will be reconciled back to the budget with the auditors. Within the first draft before you tonight, there is the increase of $56,000 transferred to the asset reserve, and that is approved within the asset management plan in 2021. And that is included within the draft tonight, and that is closing the gap, our infrastructure funding gap, and we should be fully funded by 2058 if there was no inflation since that asset management plan. So an item to note is there's may be adjustments presented at a later date if they are brought forward additions to the operation or not. So we started, as I alluded before, we started the first draft budget with a CPI increase of the 5.867%. And then the line items were reviewed by department heads, adjusted up and down. The first draft also includes the salary grid approved by council. And then the salary plan compensation and benefits has increased by $426,000 or 8.9%. This includes our service level changes, proposed service level changes, as well as our level ups, step ups as people are progressing through the approved grid. So the 2023 corporate salary plan totals $5.4 million. Also included in the first draft is estimated assessment growth at $134,000. So that's a good note. Outstanding items still to be considered. There's the provincial grant reports that'll be brought forward on the one-time efficiency grant projects that we received money for, $503,000. So a report will be brought forward on the status of those projects and where we are with spending those funds. The grants that are included within the first draft of the budget are ones that have been approved and we know we've been awarded. However, there are other grant funds that we have applied for that we're pending notification on. Hopefully we're successful and we can include those in the next draft of the budget. They will be added as we hear. So there's a couple outstanding external information that we're still waiting for. We're waiting on the Grand River Conservation Authority and the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority's 2023 budgets. So highlights within the draft budget. There is included in this draft, the contingency reserve transfer. There was a 3-year phase that was approved in 2021. So this is the last year that it's going to be transferred in, and that is considered for a stabilization of the property tax rates, and that is a $40,000 transfer from reserves, from the contingency reserve. In the first draft of the budget, it's proposed to keep the Community Investment Reserve Fund at the $20,000 contribution for another year and revisit this in 2024. This was reduced previously because of the reduction in community activities due to the pandemic. Activities are starting to bounce back and become more prevalent within the community. However, I'm proposing to leave it at the $20,000 contribution in the 2023 budget. If the Budget Advisory Committee so chooses, this can be returned to the pre-COVID levels if they choose, and that would require an additional transfer to reserves of $33,000, which would be another 0.4 levy increase, approximately. Also proposed within the first draft is to utilize $20,000 from the calcium stabilization reserve. And this is due to the fact that calcium expenses have increased over the last few years. The costing methodology that we've been using has been the same for the last several years, and it's only been CPI'd. So this did not take into account for the increased trucking costs as well as increased fuel surcharges and the increase in the calcium cost itself. So I'm proposing to use $20,000 from that stabilization reserve to accommodate that and bring us up to current costing, and then we'll adjust accordingly to the current costing outlook for the year. So then the chart on page 27 of your agenda, the first chart that summarizes the high level of the first draft budget. So you can see for the revenues, they're decreasing by $249,000 or 4.17%. However, our funding, the Ontario Municipal Partnership funding, has increased by $67,000 for 2023. The main part where this is impacting the decrease is because we haven't included those grant funding that we have not heard on yet, and we don't have as many of the large grants as last year to include. The general property tax levy has increased by $552,000 or 7.05%. Now you'll note that that's higher than the CPI that we've increased, and that's because when you combine the general and the policing levies, that is your general levy, and that has increased by $545,000 or 5.867%, which is CPI. So at the time of the report, the Purcell Fire Levy hadn't been completed. I was still awaiting for the assessment schedules. I have since received those and calculated that. So the Purcell Levy is increasing to $220,000, and that has been updated in my draft version 2. So that is an amendment to these reports. The expenses have increased by $610,000 or 5.95%, and that's due to the 2023 insurance renewal was increased by 10.05% or $31,000. Our property tax write-offs are estimated to increase by approximately $6,000, and the salary plan is up the $426,000 as stated before. Our fuel costs, we have included a $36,000 increase in the first draft. This is very conservative, so there may be adjustments at a later version if we're seeing the outlook of the fuel costs are going to level out, or we could leave it in as is, and then there's the option at year end if fuel costs are coming in way higher than what we had anticipated and budgeted, we may need to transfer from the contingency reserve for those fuel increases. So the transfer to reserves is up $292,000, and this is primarily due to the $56,000 increase to the asset reserve, and then the transfers to the landfill reserve. So transfers from trust are up $1,500, and this is to fund the Greenwood Cemetery, and that's from the trust donations that we've received. Transfers to unfunded capital are down by $2,900, and this represents the payment to the LED streetlight projects. And the Budget Advisory Committee should note that the Shakespeare Sewer Project, the residents' share, has been fully funded in 2022. Transfers to capital are down by $430,000, and generally the transfers to capital remain at CPI, with the exception of one-time transfers for special projects. And in 2022, we had one of those occur, and that was Mill Street Trail Extension, and that was a one-time transfer to capital of $330,000. So the next chart is the summary of the policing levy. And the policing levy is down for 2023, so that's a bit of more good news. It's down $7,000 or 0.49%. The next chart is the water and sewer summary level, and these are mainly presented at a CPI of 5.867% increase, and adjusted with the known items, the increase in the insurance, the fuel, the wages, as well as all of these items will be reviewed for the fees in February and March. So for the Budget Advisory Committee's note, the approved 5.867 CPI for wages and the step movements and the proposed service changes for 2023 increased the wages by the 426,000, or that is equal to a 4.6 general levy increase. So in the draft budget, there is currently the 7.64% general levy increase. Of that, 4.6 is related to the wages. Another item to note is the property assessments they remain at 2016 values, as the assessments have been frozen by the province through 2023. So we're still awaiting to hear how and when the province is going to roll out the next assessment update. The education rates have been released in Ontario Regulation 576 of 2022, and the township's education levy has increased by 62,000, or a total of 1.6 education levy increase. Perth County rates haven't been announced as of yet. Once they are announced, they will be included in the budget and impacts will be provided to council. So the first draft as presented to the committee tonight is in a deficit position of $164,519. As stated before, staff have closely reviewed the line items and adjusted and made reductions where possible. The next chart on page 30, and this is just for the committee's information purposes. I'm not assuming this is how you're going to balance it, but I just wanted to provide information for the committee to consider. If the balance was to be, or the budget was to be balanced by that levy increase of the 164,000 of the current deficit now, this is what it would look like for the different classes with the median assessments. So for a single family home, the median assessment of 300,000, it would be an $86 increase. A farmhouse would be a $51 increase. The average farmland would be $104. A standard industrial property would be $203, and a small retail commercial would be $72 increase annually. So on the flip side of that, sometimes it's easier for people to relate to the increase related to 100,000 of their assessment. So based on $100,000 assessment, the residential would go up $29, farmland would go up $7, commercial $36, and industrial $56. And that's per $100,000 of assessment annually. So currently, if we balance the budget with a levy increase, the levy change is at a $709,000 increase, or a 7.64% increase. When we deduct the assessment growth, the levy increase comes down to a $575,000 increase, or a 6.19% increase after assessment growth. The next chart on page 31 of the agenda demonstrates the changes within the levy. So it's kind of divided in half here. The provincial and external changes are on the left. And you'll note the Ontario Municipal Partnership Grant increase of $67,000. Our OPP decrease in costs of $7,000. And then we have the Conservation Authority increases. This is, we have the Upper Thames budget, draft budget, and I have included the CPI for the Grand River and the Maitland Valley. So once those last two budgets are received, those changes will be inserted as well. And it's currently at a $4,600 increase. The OCIF formula funding has decreased this year by $64,000, so that pretty well offsets our funding increase. So the provincial and external changes total a increase of $5,400 funding to the municipality. And then the municipal changes are on the right-hand side, which are our corporate insurance of $31,000 increase, the contract and salary plan increase of $426,000, fuel increase of $36,000, and then our general increases throughout the budgets for the CPI of 5.867 are $222,000, and those total $714,000 for the overall 709,304, or a 7.64% increase. So the Budget Advisory Committee, there's a couple options that I've noted within the report that if an increased levy isn't desirable to balance the budget, there's a couple options. The committee could opt to transfer amount from the corporate reserves, given that the CPI is abnormally high this year. It usually ranges from a 2 to 3% increase for CPI, and we're at a 5.867 this year. So I've proposed an option in here that you could transfer from corporate reserves the difference from a 2% or a 3% CPI increase. And the ranges would be, if you went with a 2% CPI and you pulled the 3.867 from the corporate reserves, you'd be pulling about $200,000 from the reserve. And that would bring your overall levy increase to a 5.5, and after assessment growth, it would be a 4.05. If you went with a 3% CPI increase and you pulled the 2.867 from reserves, you'd be pulling about $148,000 from reserves, and that would bring your overall general levy increase to a 6.04%, and after assessment growth, it would be a 4.6%. The other option that I had within the report is to adjust the transfers to reserves. I would caution on this because I have a feeling that once we review the capital budget at our next meeting, there'll be additional transfers from reserves coming in that'll level this down. Because right now we're sitting at an increase for transfer to reserves of $292,000. That is an increase of 27.4%. That seems high. However, there are those transfers from reserves that aren't coming in as of yet because we haven't reviewed the capital. So those are a couple options for the levy increase, the deficit, for addressing that. But currently, as presented to the committee, the budget is sitting at a, if we balance it, it's requiring a $709,000 levy increase, or a 7.64%, and a $575,000 levy increase after assessment growth with a 6.19%. And that is including assessment growth at 134,295. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Paula. A lot of information there. Should have maybe had a break in between. No, I just want to also mention we have CAO Givens joining us virtually here as well. All right, again, lots of information. Do you have any questions from Paula's first report here? Do you hear me?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
There'll be carry forwards. That's the initial amount that we received. So there's some outstanding. There will be a little carry forward, I believe, and it's not included in this as of yet.
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. And service level changes for the salaries and such. That includes the two items, a couple of the items that are before us tonight. That includes the library and that includes the fire training as well?
Correct.
It does. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Bob?
Not so much a question, just I guess a comment on the insurance. I know it was dealt with late last year. How often do you go to market with an RFP to see if that's a legitimate response? My understanding from previous experiences, you usually deal with somebody for a length of time, your increases go up, you might RFP it and see if you can do a little better, and that's probably how this company got a hold of it. And it looks like it's almost doubled in the last, well, more than 5 years, but it's almost doubled, so.
For Paula?
Thank you for the question. The insurance was due to be RFP'd this year when I came on board. However, because of timing and the amount of work that goes into the RFP, I chose to go to council for an extension, a one-year extension. So the intent is in 2023, we'll go out for RFP. However, depending on how the insurance market is at the time, because we're starting to come out of the hard market, so rates may start to soften a little bit, and we may get a little more advantageous rates. But yeah, we'll have to see in a couple months what it looks like.
Anyone else? No more? Thanks, Paula. So a mover to accept the report for information. Moved by Hugh. Seconded by Amanda. Any more comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Our next report is the survey results, and I believe Mike is taking this one. Go ahead, Mike.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Am I getting a thumbs up?
Yes, Mike, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, first of all, I want to apologize for not being able to attend in person. And secondly, I want to just quickly take a moment through the chair to acknowledge all the hard work that Paula and her team and the rest of the management staff have done already to get us to this point in the budget. So I think it needs to be said about the amount of work, and I know council appreciates that well. As it relates to my report, the budget survey results, you'll see based on the report, the number of responses are down a little bit year over year. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily a surprise. I do think there's a couple factors at play as it relates to the number of responses. There is a certain level of apathy. People have been through a lot in the last few years as it relates to the environment that we're all living in. But I also think it's a reflection that there's a lot of faith that the people of Perth East have in council and staff to operate within a reasonable budget. So I take that, and I think we should all take that as a positive, that there aren't a large number of concerns raised through the budget survey process. But certainly here to try and answer any questions there may be.
Thanks, Mike. I guess your explanation, though, it seems a little disappointing. There was only 19 recipients, or participants, rather. Any questions of Mike's report in the survey? No, oh, go ahead, Jake.
Just a comment. There was a comment on the bottom of page 39, I believe. It references Road 56 between Topping and Wellesley. That is actually a county road. Just think we should perhaps consider passing that along to the county so they can take a look at it.
Sounds good. Staff make note of that for us. Any other comments, questions? Okay, need a mover to receive the report. Jeremy, seconded by Amanda. Any comments, questions? All in favor? Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Our next report is our budget vision update, and this is from Mike as well. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just again, kind of taking us back to July when we had our visioning session, and there weren't a lot of specific projects that came out of the visioning project or session itself, but I do think it's useful for us to kind of look back. I know during that session, I think we all recognized that this year was going to be a challenging year in terms of addressing the economy, CPI directly, and you can see that being reflected in the draft budget that's put before you. Certainly, I think we've tried to take all the comments that were received as part of the visioning and given, reflected upon them as staff as we prepared the budget. And certainly, again, I could try to answer any questions if there are from this report. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Any comments, questions here from this report? Seeing none. I guess I should be reading the motions, eh? A motion that the Budget Advisory Committee of Township Perth East receive the report for information. Mover, Bob, seconded. Hugh. Any other comments, questions? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to one-time requests. Who's going to be taking this one? Paula? Great. Floor is yours, Paula.
Okay, so before you is the one-time request for 2023, and the threshold is anything above 5,000 out of ordinary that isn't pre-approved. There is a report to follow. So the report following this is from the Finance Department, so I can discuss that now. And there is a request, I've got a request in there for $30,000, and that's to reconfigure the chart of accounts. The current chart of accounts is a legacy chart of accounts from what I can tell from amalgamation time. It has evolved through several treasurers. It's kind of been piecemealed, made the best of to go forward, as this is a huge project to undertake, a new chart of accounts. But I guess I'm willing to be the sucker to do that and organize things up, get them easier for staff to report on. Items will be easier to analyze, and hopefully reporting will improve and be better with a new chart of accounts. So if there's any other questions, maybe the department heads can help me out, or if there's further questions on mine, I can answer.
Great, thanks, Paula. So a couple things here, the entire list of the one-time requests, and then also the chart of account as well. Any questions? Hugh?
Yeah, like on the CEO property sale title cost is $17,000, and then right underneath, there's CEO road allowance project reserve disbursement. Obviously, one's a positive and one's a negative, so they're just canceling out. And the only other thing is, I assume, sorry, I assume that's for the unopened roads, or the, not the blind lines, the forced roads. Why would it come under the one-time request list when we do that every year?
It's my understanding that that has always come on the one-time request, as it's an outstanding project that is chipped away at every year. So we're trying to bring it to council's attention. And as you noted, Councillor McDermott, it is a net zero impact to the budget because it gets transferred from the road allowance reserve.
Thank you.
Anyone else? See none. A motion that 8.4.1, oh, sorry,
Sorry, we'll do this one.
yep. Yep. 8.4.1 and 8.4.2, that those two items as set out in one-time requests by the Township Earth East Advisory Committee be received for information. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Hugh.
We're doing both?
Together?
Yeah, that we said, yeah.
Yep. Were you moving that, Hugh? Thank you. And Jeremy seconded. Any other comments, questions? All in favor? Thank you. All right, moving along. 8.5, service level requests. There's 4 there. Paula, you again.
Thank you. So before the committee is the 2023 service level requests list. There are a few items. The fire department has an item in there for a training position shared amongst the 3 fire stations, as well as the building inspector has an addition of a second building inspector. And the library also has the increased in the wage changes due to the organizational review. So I don't know if the committee probably wants to go through, have each department go through their request. So maybe Chief Hunter can start off with his.
Sounds good. Go ahead, Chief.
Great. Thank you. So before the committee tonight is the request for, to create a part-time training officer position. It would be a contract position for 18 months. Would be reviewed at the end of the 18 months, and a report would come back to council and to the Perth East Fire Department Joint Advisory Committee. The need for this position is being driven by the changes to the mandatory requirements for training in the province for firefighters. We think that having one person having the oversight and the ability to facilitate all of the training for the 3 stations will help us as we strive to meet the mandatory requirements that have been imposed by the province. The position, like I said, contract position, and 18 months. The report was given to the Perth East Fire Department Joint Advisory Committee last week, and they did concur, supported it coming to Budget Advisory, and I'll gladly answer any questions.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions of that report from Bill? Amanda?
Not a question, just a comment, because I sit on the advisory committee. Just for the rest of council, in discussion, comparing the costs of sending away some of our firefighters in this position, we're actually creating this role is actually more economically, it's a better economically choice for the township as well. So I just wanted to underscore that piece as we're going through all of these other changes. So it is actually puts us in a a better economic position, and also make sure that our firefighters are supported with what they need.
Thank you. Any other comments for Bill or questions? Okay, thanks. I think, again, we'll deal with all 3, if we move, before we do the motions. Okay, so the next one, the building inspection, the second building inspector position. Wes?
Yes, so before the committee is an adjustment level that would put us to 2 inspectors, 2 building inspectors. So I basically just referenced the Building Code Act with regard to the responsibility. Council has to appoint a chief building official and such inspectors as are necessary to enforce the Building Code Act. And so in my 1 year and 4 months here in Perth East, we see a department that has close to 1,300 inspections last year, 348 building permits. So it's an incredibly busy department that, in my opinion, the opinion of the chief building official, has an antiquated staff size. And I think that's due to the turnover in the CBO position here in Perth East. So I think the proper time required to review permits and conduct inspections is being affected with the current staff level. The other point was in order to decrease the risk and liability. And that is to say, when we give the proper time allotted for reviewing building permits and conducting inspections, it's actually reducing the risk to the township. The other point made was that we are self-funding through building permit fees. So I guess the health and safety concern listed here would be just to ensure that the buildings are safe. And I feel like going to 2 inspectors would reflect the municipalities around us as well. Another mention here is the new developments that are being proposed are going to require additional inspections. And recently, Bill 23 will see a lot of planning previously done by the planning department at the county. A lot of that is going to be downloaded to the building departments throughout Ontario. So there's going to be a lot of added work there for building departments, and especially in Perth East. We have been tracking the number of inquiries regarding planning applications, and based on the numbers in Perth County, Perth East is by and far the most inquiries concerning zoning changes, minor variants, and that sort of thing. And the other mention here is also that a properly staffed building department generates fees and income for the township, because currently the department is overtaxed in that regard. So I feel like this service level adjustment is long overdue. And having worked in 5 municipalities previously, one was the joint services where there were 8 inspectors. Perth East is incredibly busy and understaffed. So that's all I have to say. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, Wes. Any questions for Wes, the committee? Seeing no questions, thanks again, Wes. Our next one is the library operating grant increase, staff reconfiguration. Kendra?
So as was highlighted at last week's presentation to council, the library underwent an organizational review, and it highlighted areas of service efficiency that the board and township could be implementing. The library's current staffing structure is a key area where recommendations were made for efficiencies. These recommendations, the committee might recall, will not be a surprise. This is not a new request from the board. The recommendations include introduction of new positions and a full-time CEO. The board proceeded this past year with drafting new job descriptions, as well as revising the current job descriptions for library assistant and CEO. These descriptions were then graded using the township's grading tool and compared to current market positions, both in the library field and township departments. And instead of implementing the new positions all at once, the board has proposed phasing in, adjusting the staffing levels for the library beginning with amending the current compensation for library positions and moving the CEO from part-time to a full-time position. If there are any questions, I can answer what I can, or the board members can. Thanks.
Thanks, Kendra. Any questions for Kendra on the library? Go ahead, Amanda.
Just a question. So the one item here regarding the moving to a potential full-time CEO position, it would not change service levels. Service levels would remain, or would there be additional service level things that we can expect? I'm just trying to, I think, as counselors, we have to go out and sell these things as to, the changes that we're making. So I think some of the other positions for me are a little bit easier to make the case for. And just, if you can help me, arm me with some, a case on that would be really helpful.
Go ahead, Kendra.
It is a bit, I don't want to speak too much to my own position and it becoming full-time. As far as service level change, it would just allow the CEO to actually implement and lead the strategic plan that the board has set and that matches that of township. So it's actually, allotting your staff the time to do the job that they've been hired to do. So that'd be the service level change. As far as operational impact, there would be no increase to hours of operation, but the service level would definitely change as far as the management of the library having time to implement the strategic plan and manage the facility.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, offer Kendra some support. It is awkward, given that she is the current CAO, and speak to the service level question raised by Councillor Broadhead. I think the reality that exists right now with the library is that the current CAO is working full-time hours in order to provide the service level that exists, and this would just be acknowledging that to a certain degree, and also acknowledging that there are more strategic initiatives that the library is hoping to pursue, and that, as Kendra spoke to, and she did a nice job eloquently responding, even though it is quite awkward, I just want to acknowledge that there is, it may not be specific as it relates to an increase in hours of operation, but there are strategic items that the library is excited to implement out of their org review and out of their market review, and having a full-time CEO with the library would be consistent with comparable libraries across Perth County and further than that across a much larger area. And that was part of the analysis that was undertaken just for us to better understand in Perth East what the org looks like in comparable markets.
Thanks, Mike. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we've got those four here to receive. 8.5.1 to 8.5.4, set out in the service level requests for tonight's meeting. The Perth East Advisory Committee received for information. Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Amanda. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That one's carried. Have I said that yet? Carried. All right. Moving along back to Paul, I think, the operations budget PowerPoint. There's 4 items there, but take it away, Paula.
Okay, thank you. So I think the highlight of tonight, the PowerPoint show here. So this is the PowerPoint for the first draft of the operations budget for 2023 for Perth East. And next slide. So there were no submitted questions beforehand, so we can address any questions tonight, hopefully. Next slide. So as far as changes after the circulation of this, there's only the one noted, and I did not get the slide updated in time for tonight, is the Perth South levy change and that was an increase to the 220,000. Next slide. So the general government budget's where we'll start, and the next slide, we'll start with the grants and other revenue. So the 2023 base budget is $9.6 million, and this is an increase based on the budgeted property tax supplementals, and those are tax adjustments for new properties, new buildings, as well as improvements to buildings, and those are adjustments that happen within the year. As well as there's the $56,000 increase to the transfer to the corporate asset reserve per the asset management plan. There's the one-time request of $40,000 transfer from the contingency tax stabilization reserve, and that is a decrease from $80,000 last year. So to summarize, the 2023 budget for the grants and other revenues is 9.6 million revenue compared to 2022's of 9 million revenue, for a change of $587,000, or increase in revenue of 6.51%. Next slide. So council, the 2023 base budget is $227,000 compared to 2022's budget of $191,365, a change of $35,542, or an 18.57% increase. And this is due to the market adjustment to the honorariums to correct the honorarium pricing, as well as increasing the training-related expenses to pre-COVID levels, now that we're returning to in-person trainings. Next slide. So the CAO department, the base budget for 2023 is $473,000, and this incorporates a reduction to the contracted services, and this relates to the HR coordinator position that's in-house now. It reduces our need on contracted services as we have the expertise in-house now. You'll note there is the one-time request of the road allowance projects, and it's a net zero, so that's a zero impact to the budget. So in comparison to 2022's budget, there's a $14,000 increase, or a 3.07% increase. Next slide. Donations and assistance. The base budget for 2023 is $40,500, and this includes draft budgets, including the regular donations and carry forward projects from 2022. The transfer to Community Investment Reserve remaining at $20,000. The one-time request of $41,000 for the Union Gas contribution, which goes through 2027. So in comparison, there is a $0 change in this area with a 0% increase. Next slide. The administration building, the base budget is $46,668 for 2023. Insurance is up 10.05%. So in comparison to the 2022 budget, there's a change of $2,303, or an increase of 5.19%. Next slide. The clerk's department, the base budget for 2023 is $360,533, and within this change includes advertising revenue for the community guide is decreasing. Businesses are finding a strain with the pandemic-related expenses, so they're kind of letting advertising expenses go. They're finding it hard to contribute to the advertising for this. Increased marriage licenses are being issued, so that's increasing our revenue from marriage licenses, as well as the cost to purchase the forms for the marriage license. And the insurance is up to 10.05%. So in comparison to 2022 budget, at $304,905. There's an increase of $55,629, or an 18.24% increase. And the increase is related to the decreased revenue from the advertising, as well as the clerk has returned from stat leave. So that brings the wages back up to the normal area. So next slide. Finance. The base budget is $699,858, and this is due to insurance being up 10.05, as well as staff training being returned to pre-COVID levels. There is the one-time request. There's 2 items under there. There's the reconfiguration of the legacy chart of accounts for $30,000, as well as an increase of $5,000 to the training line for workflow and efficiency savings. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $655,734, there's a $79,124 increase, or a 12.07% increase. Now, another couple other items that I should point out on the finance is the modernization funding that we received in 2022 also causes this to increase, because that's $45,000 worth of revenue we're not receiving in 2023, as well as the audit expense has been reduced by approximately $5,000 with the appointment of the new external auditors. So without the one-time requests, the finance department is at a 6.73% increase. Next slide. So on to the recreation and cultural services budgets. The arena, the base budget is $403,245. Again, you'll see the insurance is up 10.05%. Activities are returning to the pre-COVID levels, and our training has also increased to pre-COVID levels. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $408,071, there is a $4,826 decrease. So this is a change to the good of 1.18%. So the banquet hall operations, the base budget before the special rate area revenues are $170,286. And this area is fully funded by those special rate areas. And in comparison to the 2022 budget, $174,762. This one also decreases $4,376 with a change to the good of 2.5%. And one thing that I should note on the banquet hall operations is programming expenses has previously been included in the banquet hall operations. It has been moved to Perth East Recreation. So that accommodates for some of that reduction. So the bar budget, the base budget is $75,062 in comparison to the 2022 budget of $9,880. So this is a increase in costs of $2,318, or a 23.46% increase. Now these numbers are for 2023 are based on the 2019 numbers, because those would have been our most recent numbers prior to the pandemic. The pool, the base budget for 2023 is $98,815. And comparing to the 2022 budget of $83,792, there's a change of $15,023, or a 17.93% increase. Now in 2022, there was a one-time transfer from reserves of $9,500 that isn't being carried forward to 2023. So when the impact of that is removed, the department for the pool is at a 6.56% increase. The Parks Department, the 2023 base budget is $49,859. Insurance is up to 10.05%, and this department is heavily dependent on the season, so there is increased cost for the grass cutting. Compared to the 2022 year of $38,968, there was a $10,891 increase, or a 27.95% increase. And again, that is dependent on the grass cutting. This year was a quite wet year, so there was high grass cutting across the board, and that caused wages to be shifted to the areas. So the Perth East Library Board, the base budget before the Perth East operating grant levy is $306,992. And then we have the service change request of $40,527 in comparison to the 2022 budget of $289,977, or a $57,542 change. Equates to a 19.84% increase. If we remove the service change increase, the department increase is at a 5.84%. Perth East Recreation. This is the area where I said the programming expenses were formerly in the banquet hall. Now they're moved to this area. So the base budget for 2023 is $97,204. And programs are returning to pre-COVID levels, so this is a good sign. The 2022 budget was $84,696 for a change of $12,508, or an increase of 14.77%. So on to the protection services budgets. Emergency planning. The base budget is $1,700, which covers CEMC materials and supplies. There's a one-time request of $1,800 for additional emergency training, consisting of the ICS 100, 200, 300, and crisis communications training. In comparison to the 2022 budget of $8,711, there is a decrease of $5,211 in this area, for a percentage change of 59.82%. And that decrease is primarily related to the COVID pandemic and the supplies that aren't being purchased for that anymore. So on to the policing department. As noted previously in my report, the OPP contract is down, and that is down $7,097 compared to the 2022 year. And that is a change of approximately 0.5%. Crossing guards are status quo from 2022, so the 2023 base budget is $7,979 compared to the $7,584 from 2022, for a dollar change of $395, or a percent change of 5.21%. Animal Control Department, base budget is $9,974. There is an increase in contracted services for the animal control in 2023. So compared to the $6,280 budget in 2022, there's a $3,693 increase, or a 58.81% increase. So to note here, the revenue is also decreasing, as well as the contract costs are increasing. And the increased contract costs are a 22% impact. So 22% of this 58% are related to the increased contract costs. Weeds and fence viewers. Now this is an as-needed budget. So this is budgeted in case we need it. So base budget's $400, no change from 2022 year.
All right. Good. You got a question, Amanda? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious, do we know the last time the fence viewer was ever called for a dispute?
I don't know that. Does
Wes is waving his hand there.
I've been here a year and 4 months, and we've not had a dispute that's involved a fence viewer.
very rare. Ashley?
I don't know the exact year offhand, but it's been several years. Like the entire time I've been here, I think maybe once they've met, and that's 10 years.
Okay, so on to Fire Department Central. So the base budget prior to the Perth South levy for 2023 is $860,495. And this includes insurance increase as well as the higher fuel costs. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $784,813, there is a change of $75,682 or a 9.64% increase. And again, I'll note that the Perth South levy is increased to the $220,121, which is an increase of $5,571 from last year. So the Millerton Fire Station, the 2023 base budget is $252,391. The one-time service requests, $5,975. Service change requests are $5,650. So those one-time requests are for aerial repairs as well as tire replacements. And then the service change request is the part-time training position proposed. As well as included in the base budget is increased fuel costs, and the salary plan is budgeted based on a 3-year average. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $244,835, there's a $19,181 increase, or a 7.83%. So without the service change requests, this department would be a 308% increase. Shakespeare Fire Station, the base budget for 2023 is $227,242. And again, that's based on a 3-year average. For the salaries, an increased fuel costs are included, a one-time request of $6,000 related to tire replacements, as well as a PTO pump replacement. And then there's the service change request for the part-time training position. So compared to the 2022 budget of $214,619, there's a $24,273 increase, or an 11.31% increase. And then if without the service change, it would be a 5.88% increase. Sebringville Fire Station, the base budget for 2023 is $228,987. Again, with the same notes as Shakespeare and Milverton. The one-time request, $2,600, is for tire replacements. And a service change, again, for the part-time training position split by the 3 stations. Compared to the 2022 budget of $216,625, there's a $20,612 increase, or a 9.52% increase. And then without the service change request, it would be this department would be a 5.7% increase. So the West Perth Fire Services, these are showing as zeros because there is a 0 impact to the Perth East Fire Levy or the Perth South Fire Levy. So the West Perth Service Agreement is expenditures budgeted to include CPI annually. So it has increased to $146,351 for 2023, and that's an increase of $8,111. Conservation authorities. Currently, the 2023 base budget is $167,156. This includes the draft Upper Thames Conservation Area, and we're awaiting the Grand River Conservation Authority as well as the Maitland Valley Conservation Authorities. However, these budgets have been included with the CPI increase of the 5.867. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $157,753, there's a $9,403 increase, or a 5.96% increase. Bylaw enforcement. The base budget for 2023 is $48,084. And the committee should note that we've moved from salary and benefits to contracted services in this area. And then there's the one-time request of $100 to host an OA PSO meeting. In comparison to the 2022 budget of $46,448, there's a $1,735 increase, or a 3.74% increase. The building department, this department is funded by building fees generated within itself. The base expenses for 2023 is $416,952. And the building fees will be reviewed in February or March, and they'll be based on a 3-year historical information and will be brought forward to council for consideration. There's a one-time request of $2,000, which is for a sliding storage for the truck bed for signage installations. There is a service change request that we have previously presented earlier tonight, which is an addition of a second building inspector. In comparison to the 2022 budget of $429,232, there's a change of $15,304, or an increase of 3.57%. Transportation services budget, the Public Works base 2023 budget of $927,887. There's no change to the operations here. Insurance is increased 10.05%. In comparison to the 2022 budget, there is a $32,604 increase, or a 3.64%. Roads general, the 2023 base budget is $3,984,061. There's no change to operations as well. However, there's the increased fuel costs and the increased gravel trucking costs. There is one-time request for, and there's 2 items. There's the traffic counts, the 4-year cycle, done the first year of new councils at $15,000. And then there's utilizing the calcium stabilization reserve to offset increased calcium costs for a net impact of $1,206 revenue. So comparison to the 2022 budget of $3,691,978, there is a change increase of $290,877, or a 7.88% increase. Streetlights. The base budget is $92,186 for 2023. And this is the annual operating savings realized from the LED project are utilized to fund the unfunded portion of that streetlight project. And that looks like it's going to be 3 to 4 years before it will be paid off. So we always budget for $92,186, and any of the surplus funds go towards paying that unfunded revenue or unfunded capital project. Gravel pits, the 2023 base expenses are $424,530. The gravel pit is a self-funding operation, so any net surplus reserves go to reserve transfers. The transfer amount will depend on the amount of gravel that is actually used from the pit. And 100% of that net profit goes to the corporate reserve. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $400,682, there's a $23,848 increase, or a 5.95% increase. So the committee should note that the gravel scale has moved to the landfill. So there is a reserve set up for the gravel pit scale, that should be relocated to a landfill scale reserve. So the reserve policy will be reviewed and updated, and with a version being brought to council for approval with those changes. Storm sewers, the 2023 base budget, $18,037. There's no change in operations. In comparison to the 2022 budget, there's a $954 increase, or a 5.58% increase. On to environmental services budget. This is our waste management and landfill budgets. The 2023 base expenses are $687,973. Waste management is fully funded from fees and the provincial recycling grants. Our wheelie bin revenue is up from 2022, and this is in part due to the new subdivisions coming on board and new additional houses being built. There is increased contract costs from Blue Water Recycling, as well as insurance is up the 10.05%. So in comparison to the 2022 costs of $631,205, there's a $56,768 increase, or an 8.99% increase. On to the health services budget. Health services are our cemeteries, and the 2023 base budget is $8,134. And again, cemeteries are very contingent on the season, and the grass cutting costs are increased. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $5,434, there's a $2,700 increase, or a 49.67% increase. See, the smaller budgets with a smaller increase, they have a larger percentage. It looks worse.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, for the cemeteries, pretty low budget amount, but we've been having to take over cemeteries for the last few years. So within that budget, the perpetual care funds that we get, if we get them, is that just like an in and out and it helps to pay for that type of the budget, or where does that work into it?
Right now, the perpetual care funds that we would receive would be a trust fund, and you're allowed to use the interest for your operations. And with interest rates being so low the past few years, there hasn't really been that much to bring into operations. Interest rates are increasing, so those amounts will be increasing that we can transfer to operations to help cover. So hopefully they'll start looking a bit better and we won't need as much.
So we're only using the interest off of those loans?
Yeah, that's all we're allowed to use. Planning and development budgets. So the economic development budget, the 2023 base budget is $6,857. And this is for marketing items and purchase of Canadian flags for the various buildings. And in comparison to the 2022 budget of $2,418, there's a $4,439 increase, or 183% increase. Now there is a small portion of the new development drainage coordinator position that is allocated to economic development. Milverton beautification, the 2023 base expenses are $8,600. And council approved in October of 21 the funding from this area to be transferred from the Milverton Economic Development Reserves, as the beautification reserve had been depleted. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $9,100, there's a $500 benefit, and there's a decrease to the levy of 5.49%. Planning department, the 2023 base budget is $104,949, and this is where the majority of the development drainage coordinator position is allotted to. So in comparison to the $107,000, $133 in 2022, there is a decrease in the levy of $2,184, or a 2.04% decrease. Municipal and tile drainage, the 2023 base budget, $65,770. This includes our municipal drainage assessments based on the anticipated work that's to be completed in 2023. So in comparison, I just noticed a couple errors on the slide. The 2023 budget is $65,770, and the 2022 budget, $62,612, for a change of $3,158, or a 5.04% increase. Source water protection, the 2023 base budget is $19,680. We have a renewed contract with Upper Thames River Conservation Authority to implement the source water protection plans and support our sustainable local actions to protect drinking water. This agreement runs through 2023. In comparison to the 2022 budget of $18,589, there's a $1,091 increase, or a 5.87% increase. So now on to the water and sewer budgets. The water budget for the 2023 base expenses are $347,885. There's no change to operations. The insurance has increased. And again, as noted previously with the grass cutting, there was also wage allocation adjustments between the water, sewer, and public works to reflect actual activity for those workers. There's also increased fuel costs in the water area. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $290,466, there is $57,419 change, or a 19.77% increase. And again, to note, the water and sewer rates will be reviewed in February and March.
Amanda?
Sorry, can we go back to the previous slide on the source water protection? Just took me a second to digest. Just so it help me understand. So our current agreement is with the Upper Thames CA, and that ends at the end of this year. And so when, is there other conservation authorities potentially hypothetically that we could, like, I'm looking for future years? How does that work? Why was Upper Thames chosen over some of the other CAs in the watershed? Do we know the answer? I'm just curious, you can send me an email, or someone can send me an email afterwards. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure on that, Councilor Broadhagen, but I can look into it and get back to you. Oh, okay. CAO Mike.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead. Help us out.
Very quickly on this, Councilor Broadhagen, I'm scheduled a meeting with Upper Thames around this particular issue that should happen in the next couple of weeks to get some more information myself. I believe the reason we're engaged with Upper Thames is because of it captures the largest area within Perth East, but I'm not 100% sure, but I am going to spend some time with the Upper Thames Source Protection folks and our staff to get a better understanding, knowing that the agreement is about to come to an end.
That help?
It does, and I will send you some questions, Mike. I'm curious about a couple other things, so thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
They did the original.
You?
They did the original source water protection for us, and so that's why it was continued on.
Your mic on,
Because they're the largest in the area, they got the job to do the original. So then when the original was done, then they were given the job to continue on. But it wasn't a whole lot of people that you could get to do that either. And we didn't have anybody internally that could do it, so they were given the job.
Thanks, Hugh, and then Mike will get us some more answers as well. Go ahead, Paula. Finish up.
Okay. So on to the wastewater sewer budget. the 2023 base expenses of $318,896. Again, there's no change to operations, but to note, there's the wage allocation adjustments within the water, wastewater, public works due to actual activities reflected. There's the increased fuel costs as well as the insurance is up. So in comparison to the 2022 budget of $295,989, there's a $22,906 increase, or a 7.74% increase. And again, the wastewater rates will be reviewed in February or March. So outstanding issues under the operation budgets, we have the outstanding Grand River Conservation Authority levy, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority levy, as well as the county rates are outstanding. And so our next steps will be our February 28th meeting. We can continue any operation discussions if necessary. There'll be the main point will be the capital budget discussions as well as reserve and debt positions. And then there's the March 28th meeting. If necessary, we'll discuss capital continuations, and the surplus deficit for the prior year might be known at that point in time, but I'm not really sure. We have the auditors coming in the second week in March. And then we will review the tax rates as well. And the April 11th meeting, any further changes or discussion items prior to the final passage of the tax rates and the levy bylaw, if necessary. So yeah, that concludes the slideshow. If there's any further outstanding questions, I can, happy to answer them or get back to you.
Great, thanks, Paula. That's, again, a lot of information there. The detail level is on 76 to 120, 112 there as well, so that's for our information as well. Do we have any more comments or questions for Paula?
Just a final
Amanda?
question through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, for everyone's presentations. Just a question, and not to put you on the spot, Paula, you might not know the answer. Some of our neighbors, other neighboring municipalities within the county, in terms of obviously our communications will go out in April with the bylaw. You know, in terms of where are some of our other counterparts at in terms of timelines, because I believe we're a little ahead of schedule compared to previous years. Is that, I don't know if you can speak to that, high level or generally?
I know Perth South is actually taking their operations budget tonight as well, first time. As far as the other lower tiers, I'm not really sure where they are in that process, and I know the county is just starting discussions as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I know in some years we've actually passed it in March, so instead of April, so it'd be better, but we'll see how the rest of the meetings go. Any other questions for Paula on her report? Seeing none, that items 8.6.1, 8.6.4, set out in the PowerPoint for tonight's meeting for the advisory committee be received for information. Need a mover, please? Excuse me, Amanda, seconder? Seconder Jeremy, any more comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thanks again, Paula. Moving on to a couple of additional staff reports. The first one, 8.7.1, being the funding options for the Milverton Beautification Committee. Paula, go again.
Okay, thank you. This is the last report for me tonight. So council had requested funding options for the Milverton Beautification Committee, and in 2021, the CAO and treasurer at the time presented a report to council outlining several of the various funding options for community beautification requests. And council, the committee should be aware that the Milverton Beautification Committee reserve had originated from the sale of the Milverton Hydro, and that was depleted in the budget year of 2021. And at that time, it was decided that the Milverton Beautification Committee would present their budgets, and it would be funded from the Milverton Economic Development Reserve, which also originated from HydroSal. So currently, the Milverton Beautification annual budgets are being submitted to council for approval with consideration from funding from the Milverton Economic Development Reserves. This reserve has a projected 2023 opening balance of $18,622, which would approximately fund the next 2 years' worth of budgets based on their average budgets of around $8,000. So there's a few funding options that I had laid out within the report. One being the township could take over the beautification projects and be done with township staff or contracted services. This could consist of hiring additional staff or new contract services. Another option would be to fund the community beautification projects through the Perth East Recreation and Culture Funding Policy, FI 1.23.01, during the annual budget process. Now, these guidelines and the application process are already established and defined within the policy, and they're working well for community organizations requesting funds from the township. And currently, any requests from this policy are funded from that Community Investment Reserve. So there's another option in the creation of a business improvement area or areas, depending on where we wanted to set those up. This process is a very intensive and lengthy process, and it would require a lot of staff resources in the establishment as well as the continued operations of a BIA. And then the final option presented in this report would be to discontinue support of any community beautification projects. I'm not really sure that's an option that we want to consider, but we can discuss that. So staff is recommending option B, funding through the Perth East Recreation and Cultural Funding Policy on an annual basis. And one thing that I didn't present in the report is there is the option, if the committee and council so chose, we could continue funding from the Milverton Economic Development Reserve until that is depleted and then transfer to this policy. Or we can transfer to the policy for the 2024 year. But within the report, I'm recommending to fund from the Milverton Economic Development Reserve for 2023 year and going forward using the Recreation and Culture Funding Policy. So that concludes my report. If there's any questions, be happy to answer.
Thanks, Paula. A few options here. Any questions from the committee? Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll speak to a couple of the items on here, and I think with the depletion of the fund 2 years ago, I think the intention always was to draw that down to zero for the beautification, and I feel like that's probably what we should be doing with this other fund, is drawing it down to zero for beautification. Gives us 2 more years of funding that's already there. Then we don't have, you know, an interesting fund sitting there that's earmarked just for Milverton. And then I think moving forward after that, we have a decision to make about, you know, you're suggesting the culture funding policy, but maybe there's an avenue to create some other reserve there for any community to put forward. You know, if there's $20,000 a year in there, for example, if Shakespeare had a group that was going to do that, Shakespeare could put an application in, or Millbank could, or, you know, Milverton would continue to do it, I'm sure, too. So I think for the next 2 years, we should be drawing that fund down to zero and then looking at the options moving forward. Option C, we had some preliminary discussions at the Business Association in Milverton about a BIA and approaching the municipality, and at that point there wasn't a lot of interest in doing that. There is a lot of work involved with it, and it's a lot more formal than we're used to, I'll say. So that maybe in 2 or 3 years as the communities grow, that's an option. But I think for 23 and 24, we should be drawing that reserve down to zero and giving the funding from there.
Thanks, Jeremy. Any other questions, comments? Hugh?
Yeah, I support keeping the committee. I think when local people have something invested in their community, you get a far better result. Nothing against our employees or anything, but I think when people invest in their community, it's a far better place.
Thanks, Hugh. Any other comments or questions?
Are we able to move an option tonight?
Yep, we move.
I'm ready to move option B, the recommended option.
So option B is take this year, 2023, from the economic fund, and then 2024, move forward. So that's
Correct.
different suggestion as what Councillor Matheson had, but if that's what the committee wishes. So you want to move that we do option B, which would be to take from the 2023 from the economic fund, and then next year take from or have them apply through the grant progress. Okay, that was moved by Amanda. Do we have a seconder for that?
Sorry, option B, from what I can see, is to have them go through the policy. That's what you're wanting to do, Amanda?
So, starting this year. Clarification there, Paula?
I think what's on paper and what was verbally said are two different things. So what I'm in agreement with, what I do want to move is Paula's recommendation, which is slightly different to what's printed in front of us.
So if you read the recommendation on the report, those 3 paragraphs, those are what you wish to move? So basically, receive for information, and that the 2023 amount come from the economic reserve, and that starting in 2024, they apply to the recreation fund, culture. Okay. Yep. So that's moved by Amanda. We have a seconder for that one. I'll call again. We have a seconder. Last time, we have a seconder.
Sorry, I'll second to get it on the floor to discuss it a bit further.
So that's seconded. Hang on a
Sure.
second. So the recommendation as printed on the report has been moved and seconded. So comments and questions?
I would just like to remove that third paragraph in the motion, the third paragraph in the motion, which is committing us to having to put an application into that fund for next year when we're sitting with an awkward amount of about $9,000, which is pretty much the same as what the budget is annually. And then we're just sitting there with another reserve fund open that I think we should get rid of. That's all. So I'm not sure if...
I'm in favor of that. It also reduces administrative burden, so I'm in favor of that.
We can decide next year where the money comes from next year and go forward.
Okay, so you're moving that then, Amanda, a bit of a change to, we're just going to strike the last paragraph? Or we should probably include 23 and 24?
I'm just amending it.
You're just going to amend it to remove the last paragraph and add 2024 to paragraph 2?
Yes.
These are testing me, aren't you?
You're doing great, Jerry.
So we have a mover and a seconder for that. Any more comments or questions? Mover and a seconder for the amendment. Okay, thank you. Jerry moves that. Bob seconds the amendment. So we're voting on the amendment?
Yes, we're voting on removing the requirement for policy section in 2024 and adding that the funds will come from the Milverton Economic Development Reserve for 2023 and 2024.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions on that? Let's have a vote. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, everyone. Do you want me to read that one then too? So this one here was moved by Amanda, seconded by Jeremy. That the report prepared by the treasurer, today's date, for the Milverton Beautification Committee be received by the committee, and that the Milverton Beautification Committee 2023 budget submitted for approval to the township be funded from the Milverton Economic Development Reserve for the 2023 and 2024 year. Anything else? Any other comments, questions on that one? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. One more for the staff reports, the Public Works, triaxle cab and chassis. Jake, you taking this one for Wes?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. So this report here is for the procurement of a triaxle cab and chassis unit, including the U-body front plow harness and wing assembly. There's a couple of things that would have to be approved or granted by the Budget Committee tonight in order to make this happen. One being pre-budget approval for the 2023 capital purchase. And secondly, to authorize the procurement of this asset through single sourcing in accordance with bylaw 60-2016. So I think the challenges with procuring a heavy truck is well known right now across the board. We don't have to look back too far. In late 2021, we actually issued a joint tender with the county for a couple of triaxle cab and chassis units, and we did not get any submissions. So there's a bit of uncertainty in the market as it relates to the supply. We ended up getting approval for single sourcing, and we were able to do that in early 2022. We actually have still not received that unit. Hopeful that arrives shortly. So this unit here is scheduled for replacement in 23. Early indications kind of suggested this might not be an option for us in 23, talking with some of the suppliers, but we had one kind of come to us late here and suggested they have a build slot available for us in Q3, and that being Viking Kives. So just looking to try and procure this asset this year. Otherwise, we'd be looking at pushing to 24, where we have yet another triaxle cab and chassis unit to be scheduled to be replaced. So ideally, the replacement schedules we would prefer not to coincide. So that's the objective with this here. If you have any questions, I'll try and answer those.
Thanks, Jake. Any questions of the committee? Jake? Seeing no questions. The report entitled Pre-Budget Approval, Single Sourcing and Supply of a Triaxle Chassis and U-Body Front Plow Harness and Wing Assembly dated January 17, 23, prepared by the Manager of Public Works and Parks, be received by the Perth East Budget Committee for information, and that pre-budget approval be granted for the 2023 capital purchase of a triaxle cab and chassis unit, and that the Manager of Public Works be authorized to procure this asset through single source and/or direct negotiation in accordance with bylaw 60-2016, being the Perth East procurement policy. And that confirmed with this resolution, the purchase of a triaxle cab and chassis and U-body front plow harness and wing assembly through Viking, is that pronounced Sives? Gyves? Gyves Limited for the quoted price of $386,067 plus HST. I have a mover for that, please. Moved by Amanda, seconded by Bob. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. There you go, Jake, get us a truck. Okay. Moving right along. How are we doing for time? Good. Correspondence. This just received the Upper Thames Conservation Authority draft budget. Anything on that? Seeing none. That the 2023 draft budget prepared by the Upper Thames Conservation Authority dated December 22nd, 2022, be received by the Perth East Budget Advisory Committee. Mover, please. Moved by Amanda, seconded by Hugh. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I don't see, do we have a closed session? No need for closed session. No business arising? Do we have any notices of motions? Seeing none. Any new business? No new business. Any announcements? No announcements. Do we have anything else? Nothing? Looks like we can adjourn. Need a mover to adjourn. Moved by Amanda, seconded by Jeremy. You scratching or seconding? You're seconding. How's that? All right, all in favor to adjourn? That's carried. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, staff, for all your work on this. Moving right along.